Welcome to Expedition Networking, a special segment of the Networking RX podcast. I'm Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections and your host for this program. For those of you who are familiar, on the Networking RX podcast, we share information and have conversations with experts, such as authors, researchers, and social scientists. And all of these programs are aimed at helping you learn how to become better at building professional relationships and understanding why they work. In this Expedition Networking segment, however, we're going to bring on successful entrepreneurs and unique professionals and explore their networking adventure and learn how they used relationships to create lasting success. Today on Expedition Networking, we have Cornell Thomas. He's an international speaker, author, creator of the Positivity Summit, podcast host, husband and father. And we're glad to have him today. Tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but in a couple days, he's headed off to Dubai. He's got a whole speaking engagement there. So he is truly an international speaker. Cornell, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Frank, for having me.
Well, I appreciate you making the time so we could fit this in and get it recorded. And again, you're truly an international speaker. You got books. Where did this all come from? I mean, when you were in high school, you didn't say, hey, I'm going to be an international speaker one day, right?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Definitely
not. So it all, your life has come together and it's great. Can you kind of take us through the journey and
sure,
and the people that have touched you along the way?
Sure. I have to say my mom before anybody else, Frank, because she's really my inspiration, and she is the man. The reason I'm the man who I am today is because of my mom. So when I was 4 years old, my father, who was a police officer in the city of Passaic, New Jersey, passed away from cancer. And when he passed away, this is 1979, my mom had to raise 5 kids on her own with very little money. My dad, back then, they didn't have the pensions that they have now. So my father passed away. It was just like, okay, you're going to go from taking care of 5 kids to taking care of 5 kids and now having to work 2 and 3 jobs. So my idol, my inspiration was always right in front of me. My mom didn't preach to us a lot. She gave us little nuggets here and there, but it was just watching her work ethic and watching her mental fortitude when things were really, really bad. And for now, when I look back at it, I'm like, oh, that was a tough time. But when I was in it, I never really knew, because the way she handled it, right? Like the way she was all about her solution. She was not about the problems. And I tell my mom all the time, even to this day, I'm like, Mom, I don't think you realize what insurmountable odds that you got us through. And she just doesn't, she sees it as, well, anybody would do this. And I think that's what the great ones do, right? The great ones don't realize that, no, not anyone can just do this. Like Michael Jordan having 38 points during, having a 103 flu, right? Not anybody can just do that. And my mom was like my Michael Jordan. So when you said in the beginning, you didn't see yourself in high school, being an international speaker, Frank, I didn't see myself 9 years ago being an international speaker. My journey was through basketball. And I didn't start playing basketball until I was 16 years old. So all the things in my life I kind of caught on late, did them later on in life. Most kids now, you go to Instagram, there's some best 4-year-old in the nation video of some kid dribbling through cones. I started playing basketball because I had a cousin in Virginia who was just a stud athlete. He was football, basketball, and track. And my mom is from this town called Bird's Nest, Virginia. And she used to take us there every summer. And we'd sit there doing nothing. There was literally nothing to do. There's a jukebox across the street for any of you guys that remember what a jukebox is.
Yeah.
And a pool table. And a pool table. That's all we had for a week. And one day I was sitting on my cousin's bed and I looked under his bed and he had all these newspaper articles. And it was pictures of him in the paper. And it was the first time that I've ever seen a teenager in the newspaper for anything. So I was like, wow, I can be in the newspaper if I play basketball. That was my thinking. And then as I started getting, because I had no identity up until that point, I was the youngest boy out of 3 boys. So I was just like, okay, maybe this is something to kind of get my name on the map, right? I'm always so-and-so's younger brother. So I wanted an identity of my own. So I was like, I'm going to play basketball. What I didn't realize at that time is basketball takes a lot of work. You just can't play basketball. I looked the part, I'm 6 foot. That's how 6'2", black kid, looks kind of athletic, from Jersey. I was like, okay, yeah, I can do this. And the first time I went to the basketball court, I threw the ball at the basket. It went over the hoop which is hard to do. It's like 12 feet high from the rim to the back in the backboard, and rolled down the hill. And so I'm just like, okay, well, let me try this again. So I did it for 2 more hours, realized that I suck at basketball. That was my big epiphany. And out of nowhere, this 5'8" Filipino guy comes walking towards the court. And he comes up to me and he goes, "My name's Ray. Do you want me to show you how to shoot a basketball?" So I always tell people, think about the aesthetics of that, right? 6'3", 6'2" black kid, 5'8" Filipino guy, like in this almost Karate Kid moment where he comes up to me and says, "I'll show you how to shoot a basketball." And for the next 2 hours, Ray showed me how to properly shoot a basketball. In that moment in time, changed the trajectory of my life because I didn't know if I was going to be a basketball player until I met Ray. I realized once he left that even though I was still very bad at this game, if I put the work in, I can get better because I saw the small little improvements. And that's what I think people tend to kind of overlook, those small little baby steps into getting to where you're supposed to be or leveling up to who you're going to be. So I started playing basketball 7 hours, 8 hours a day. And after the end of the summer, I told my mom, I said, "Mom, I'm going to be a professional basketball player." And my mom looked at me and she goes, "That's great, baby. What do you want for dinner?" And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, wait a second. Like, I don't think you just heard me. Like, I'm going to be a professional basketball player. And I didn't know that at the time, but my mom saw how hard I worked. And her belief system in me was so big that her mindset was like, of course you're going to be a professional basketball player, right? Like, every day I see you with that basketball. Every day I see you walk 3 miles to the court, come 3 miles back. I can't drive you, and I just see what you're doing. Of course that's going to happen. And so my junior year, typical athlete story, got cut from varsity my junior year, sat JV. My senior year, barely played varsity. At the end of my senior year, my basketball coach sat us all down at the end of the game. We were terrible. We were 4-19. And he said, "Cornell, you're going to be a great businessman." Said nothing about basketball. Like, hey, you have an opportunity to go on and play somewhere else. And I took that and put that like as this chip I had on my shoulder. Like, I'm going to show everybody. And I think a lot of people do that. Like, I'm going to show this person. You hear all these stories in business and life where, they were slighted. It's like, I'm going to show this person. So I said, I'm going to show this guy that I can play college basketball. Not only play college basketball, I'm going to get a professional contract. So I sat my mom down again. And I said, "Mom, I want to go to college and play basketball." And my mom said, "Baby boy," she goes, "I can't afford to send you to college." She said, "We don't have the money." And that's the first time I've heard my mom say "can't" in my whole entire life, in my 18 years on earth. And that's what really kind of hit it home for me. I was like, if my mom's saying that she can't, then this is a dire situation. So I said, "Mom, I'm going to work 2 jobs. I'm going to go to a 2-year college that I can afford. And then I'm going to get a scholarship to play at a 4-year school. And then from there, I'm going to get a contract to play professional basketball." And my mom just looked at me and said, "Okay." And so I worked two jobs. I worked at a pharmacy and I worked at a sneaker store called Foot Action. I paid my way through college. My freshman year of college was the first time I ever got into the newspaper. I was still not very good, but somehow the camera caught me doing something goofy, right? I cut it out, gave it to my mom. We put it in the refrigerator, and I said, "All right, I'm almost there. I know I can get there. Like, I'm in the newspaper. I might not be doing anything cool in the newspaper, but at some point I will." And then my sophomore year, after 4.5 years of playing basketball, it happened, right? It's like I put those 10,000 hours in, and it just first team all conference, first team all region, all these all-star games, blah, 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 blah. And everybody that I went to high school with, even people from the year before, they didn't think it was me. They would see my name in the paper and they'd be like, "There's no way that's Cornell Thomas from Morris Hills High School. Like, he didn't even play varsity." Because people see where you land and they don't see the journey, right? Like, so I'm speaking to the choir with you, Frank, right? Like, people see the success that you have, like, "Oh, well, Frank probably just blinked his eyes."
Yeah.
And then there it happened.
Yeah. He's lucky. He's lucky.
He's just lucky. He got lucky, not realizing that, that work ethic and that struggle, that's what breeds opportunity, right? That's where the luck comes from, right? But you're going to get super lucky if you keep working and if you have that belief system in yourself. And so I got a scholarship to play in North Dakota. I didn't even know where North Dakota was on the map. The coach calls my house. I tell my mom, I said, "Mom, I got a scholarship to play in North Dakota." She goes, "Boy, do you know where North Dakota is?" I said, "Yeah, that's where they have the monument." She goes, "No, dummy, that's South Dakota." And she gets out this map and she puts it on the table and she goes, "You are here. This is North Dakota." And I said, "Mom, it's a free education." She goes, "Okay, God." She goes, "Go." She goes, "Go and do your thing." So I went there, actually met my wife in North Dakota. She played basketball on the women's team. And when I came back home, a friend of mine, another opportunity, my friend, one of my really good friends at the time, Kevin, goes, "Cornell," he goes, "There's a gym about 35 minutes away from here where NBA guys are playing at this YMCA. You need to go down there. Because he knew that, like, I want to play in professional basketball. So I said, there's no way that 30 minutes away from my house, there's a gym where NBA guys play. He goes, Cornell, he goes, I was just there. They wouldn't even let me play. He goes, you need to come down. So I said, okay, like laughing to myself, like, okay, whatever. So he drives me down to the gym the next day. And there are NBA guys that I just finished watching on ESPN.
Right.
In that gym. And I'm sitting there like, holy crap. I said, yeah, let's go. It took me 3 months for me to get off a clean shot. 3 months. And I was, I'm 6'5". I'm a guard. I was athletic. I can shoot. 3 months for a clean shot. Not one where I'm just standing there, someone creates for me to create my own shot. And I realized there's levels to this, right? There's levels to everything in life. And when you see the 12th guy on the bench in the NBA and you think, oh, that guy sucks. Like, he doesn't even play. And then you see him play against a normal human being.
Right.
You realize what the levels are, right? Like,
yeah.
I was playing against guys that were the 8th, 9th guy on the team that were the best players I've ever seen that were almost impossible to guard. And I'm like, holy crap. I said, okay, so I got to do something more. Like, I have a crazy work ethic. It's not enough to compete with these guys. I have to do even more to compete with them. And that's another thing that people don't realize is, like, as the levels get higher and higher, the work has to get higher and higher. That belief has to get higher and higher. You have to match it, right? So I started working out even harder, and I got a contract to play in Lisbon, Portugal. And I had to leave in 2 weeks. And I'm like, okay, my agent says, Cornell, you got this contract, top division in Portugal. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'll go there for a couple of years, play, and then come back here. The money's tax-free. So I'm like, I'll send all the money to my mom. I've never been a materialistic guy. Don't even have a watch. I'm like, I don't need the money. I just want to play and help my mom. And then a week before I was supposed to go, I'm on a court shooting with some of my friends, and I rupture my Achilles tendon.
Yeah.
And so when this happens, and I'm looking at this hard cast from the middle of my thigh to the end of my foot, and my mom comes in my room, and she kisses me on the forehead, and I watch her walk to one of the 3 jobs and told her she never have to work again. I tell people up to that date, that was the hardest moment of my life, and I've been through some hard stuff. There's nothing harder than thinking that you disappointed someone that you love. And she walked out, and obviously she was upbeat and cheerful and optimistic. And when she left, I was in complete why me mode. Why? I was so pissed, Frank. I was just like cursing the heavens. Like, I'm good to people. Like, the whole entire purpose was to make sure my mom didn't have to struggle. Like, why would God ever, out of all the people you can pick on, like, why me? Right.
Yeah.
The whole thing I'm thinking. So I'm going on this tangent by myself in the house, and something like stopped me in my tracks. Right. And I started to think about my mom, and I started thinking about coming home sometimes and our lights being cut off because we couldn't pay the bill. And my mom just literally just walking in and handing out flashlights and lighting candles, right? Or we didn't have hot water, and my mom would boil cold water, put it in a bathtub, mix it so we can take baths. And I said, man, the woman you were raised by has always been about the solution. She's never been about the problem. What are you going to do? Like, are you going to sit here and just cry the whole entire time? Like, let it out. I know it hurts, but like, what are you going to do tomorrow? And that was the question I just asked her. Like, what now? Like, what are you going to do tomorrow? So I called another friend of mine, another buddy named Kevin, and I said, Kevin, pick me up. We're going to the gym on Monday. And he sounded like I died because my close circle knew how big this dream was. And he goes, Cornell, what are we going to do? I said, just pick me up. We went to the gym, and I shot from a chair for the next 6 months. And it did nothing for my basketball game, but it did everything for my sanity, right? It got me into an environment that I loved and took me out of my room for an hour and a half where I'm looking at the 4 walls, right? And so eventually was able to get back to playing. Right? I was only 24 years old, and then I had the opportunity to coach basketball. And my old junior college coach goes, Cornell, school started, we have no coach. Would you coach? Because I was working out there. Again, like, I'm working out, right? I'm training, and I just happen to be training in the same gym that I used to play at. And now I have an opportunity to coach because I'm at that gym working out, not sitting home doing nothing. And I go, no, I don't want to coach. I was like, you crazy? I'm 24 years old. I'm young. Like, I was still connected to the identity of me being a basketball player. And my mom said, she goes, Cornell, just out of respect for your coach, just go on the interview and see what he says. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to go on this interview, and I'm going to bomb this interview the worst possible way. And then I'll go back to training and being a professional basketball player. So I go on the interview, my arms are crossed. I'm like defiant. and my coach is saying stuff I'm not paying attention to. And I swear to you, Frank, 3 days later, I have an orange whistle around my neck and 15 guys calling me coach. I don't know what he put in the water. I don't know, like, if there's something like something put in the air, but I was coaching basketball, and I was never coached the game before again, but I had no time to think about that life change. I had no time to think of that transfer from player to coach. I just had to coach because I was thrust into this position. So I started coaching basketball, and then I started to see, okay, my real purpose on this earth is to help people. And at that point in time, I thought it was through basketball. I had all these kids from the inner city. Parents just dropped them off. Haven't been taught the life skills to survive in school, to survive on a team, and now as a 24-year-old, some of these guys are 21. I got to teach these guys how to be men, right? How to really be men. And so I started coaching, and 6 years go down the line, and then I go to Blair Academy, this big prestigious school that has NBA players to learn more. I'm an assistant coach. And then right before my son was born, I started to have this shift, like, there's something more to this life than basketball. And that was the scariest thing for me, because I'm like, since 16 years old, it's been basketball. I'm now 33 years old, 34 years old. It's not possible that there can be anything else at this point in time. And I talked to a good friend of mine who's now coaches at the Atlantic Hawks, but he was at Bucknell University. And I asked him, I said, we were about to have our kids at the same time. I said, Charles, I said, when are you in the gym and when do you leave? He goes, well, I go to the gym at 6:30, and then coach has us leave whenever he decides that it's time to go. I said, that's during the season though, but how about the off season? He goes, well, I go into the gym at 8 a.m. and then coach tells us to leave whenever it's time to go. He goes, that can be 2 a.m. That could be 11 p.m. And I'm thinking to myself, I grew up without a father. How could I bring a life onto this planet and not be there for it? I said, there has to be something else. And one day I was on Facebook and I was reading my timeline. It was just most negative stuff. It wasn't even during the debate, which was crazy. It was just like the most negative stuff in the world. And I took a quote from a book of positive quotes and I put it on Facebook, and people liked it. And so every day I would take a quote out and put it on Facebook. And one day I woke up and I couldn't find the book. So I wrote my own quote, and people still liked it. So I'm like, well, screw the book, right? I'm going to make my own quote. So I did that every single day. And after a couple of months, a friend of mine, my friend Stephanie, said, hey, you should write a blog. And again, another seed is planted, right? You should write a blog. I'm like, I didn't know what a blog was. What the hell is a blog? And we were sitting in this place called Panera Bread in Rockaway, New Jersey. And she made a WordPress site right there. She goes, can you write one right now? I said, yeah, I can write one right now. And I wrote my first blog. It was terrible. I wrote my first blog. It was called Risk. And every Saturday I wrote a blog, and my wife does all my IT stuff. And I said, we'll call the website The Power of Positivity. And my first book was The Power of Positivity. And in that book, the second chapter is Ray, because that's the man that literally put everything in motion. And then I have at the end of the book, I have a letter to my father that I always wanted to write, but I was too introverted emotionally to let it out. I was afraid that if I started to write this and I started crying, I wouldn't be able to let it go, because I kept that emotion in for about 15, almost 20 years of not crying, not because I thought I was some tough guy. It's because I always wanted to be strong and let my mom know that I didn't need anything. Even in college, my mom would send me like $5 bills. She would send me whatever she had just to make sure I was okay. And I said, Mom, stop sending me money. I'm fine. And she was like, I know you're not fine. I was like, I'm okay. Like, keep the $5. It takes $3 to send it to North Dakota.
Right.
So I was like, we're good. So, and then there's another chapter in that book where there's a guy do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and there's a guy that Dan Scoville that trained with us and was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And he trained up until the 2 weeks of him passing away. And I wanted to write in that book, and I talk about it now and I feel it in my throat. I want to write in that book like how inspired I was by him. Like, I remember training with him and him saying, hey, Cornell, I can only go for a little bit. And I said, Dan, no problem, man. I'll wait. It's okay. And we would train, and we trained for a minute here, then he'd take a break, a minute here. And I said, I can't believe this guy is here training with us and just had 2 young kids, wife, just got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He knows he's going to die, right? And he's still here fighting. And I said, wow, what an inspiration. So I put him in the book. And when I wrote my first book, I said, I want to go share my story. And people were like, well, how are you going to go share your story? I said, anybody that says, come speak, I'm going to go and speak. And I just transfer the same work ethic I had from basketball and coaching to in life to this. And then next thing you know, I start speaking in front of 5 people, 2 people, 10 people, and it started to spread out. In 2015, I went to England, never had the means to travel, never wanted to travel. That's another important point a lot of people don't understand. When you don't have the means to do something, part of your brain shuts it off like you don't want to. So instead of admitting the fact like, well, I just don't have the means, you're like, oh, I don't want to travel anyway. That was me. That was me when I was in my 20s. I didn't want to travel. I was like, whatever. I don't need to. Because I shut that off because I never wanted to want something and not have the means to do it. And the first time I spoke in England in 2015, I was looking around and I said, this is the stuff that I see in like books. Like that's Big Ben, right? Like that's like, I'm like, this is crazy. And then my mind expanded. I said, wow, where else can I go? Right? Because once you see it in front of you and it's like tangible, you're like, oh, well, what else can I do here? Like, where else can I go? I mean, I've spoken to England 8 times already now since 2015, right? So it's just this beautiful thing that's happened where God has like really kind of directed me and put these people in my life. And still, like, you're one of them, continues to put people in my life that are amazing. You know, I met you through a mutual friend and, you know, me and you talked and it's like, here we are. And I'm always open to that connection. So I just continue to get these amazing people on my path to help lead me. Anybody that says, oh, I've done it myself, right? That's just ego talking, right? No one does it themselves. There's always someone that has either inspired you or helped steer you to the path that you're going.
Well, I mean, you know, you talk about Ray, taught you to shoot a basketball. That was a turning point. You know, you rupturing your Achilles was not God taking basketball from you. It was God setting you on the path you really wanted you to be on. It was just a message. I mean, not to get overly religious here. It's not a religious program, but, you know, something happened there and it happened for a reason and probably for the best reason.
I wouldn't have my family. If I would have played overseas, I wouldn't have my kids. I wouldn't have my wife. I wouldn't have my family. Yeah. It's so 100%. People, when I speak to kids, they're always like, don't you wish you played professional basketball? I said, well, if I played professional basketball, I wouldn't be here in front of you right now. Yeah. So I was like, there's like you said, like there's a reason that I'm not. And I right now I'm actually doing my purpose, which is helping people realize they have one and not shooting a basketball. I mean, that was a great story. At any rate, if you could go back in time and give yourself advice, you know, that senior in high school who was sitting there listening to the coach, you know, and you did become a great businessman, by the way. So he was right. He was right. He was right. You proved him wrong, but he was right. And that's awesome, you know. But what advice would you give to yourself, knowing what you know now? I mean, I could spend hours talking. There's so much to unpack here. I mean, like when your mother's walking out of the room after you're sitting there, you know, you as a parent now get it, right? Yeah. Right. You get how she was still so proud of you. She was never disappointed. Never. You know, that's my guess. Yeah. 100%. So, but advice to yourself, what would it be? Man, I mean, without the butterfly effect happening where anything would change, the one thing I would say to me is replace that chip, right? Like stop trying to prove people wrong, prove yourself right. You know, I understand why people have the chip and it's really good fuel, but I think it's a short amount of fuel because at some point you run out of targets, right? Like you run out of targets, or like Jordan used to make up targets, right? Like Michael Jordan would make up targets. Like, oh, the janitor on the Boston Celtics arena, you know, he gave me a bad look, so now I'm gonna have 60 points on him, right? When you're trying to prove yourself, right? Like, hey, I'm gonna prove to me that I can do it. You never run out of targets, right? Like my bow staff, I have a million arrows for the rest of my life. Yeah, and I just take aim. So that's what I would say. Like, replace that anger, young man. And just like prove yourself right. You don't have to worry about proving this guy wrong. Yeah, that's very good advice. Let's talk quickly about your business and how people can help you. And we're running short on time. No, it's good. It's great. Yeah. Well, I knew once we started talking, I knew we could just go. No, this is great. Well, I do a lot of speaking all over. I also speak to corporations about D&I, and also I speak to corporations about team building and culture, coming from my coaching background. So any type of speaking engagements that way, and I run a course for people that want to get into professional speaking called Get in the Game. It's a very extremely affordable course, and it's not me trying to make people sound like me. It's me trying to get people's voices to come out. I'm actually doing two workshops in Dubai next week.
Okay.
In Dubai next week.
Interesting. Okay. Well, it's good to know. What's the best way people get a hold of you?
www.cornell-thomas.com. Or you can email me at cornellthomas365@gmail.com. Just don't be surprised how fast I get back to you, because I will get back to you extremely fast.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll get that in the show notes. Well, I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Frank. I appreciate you, my brother.
To wrap things up, remember, we're looking for some enterprising business types to join our team as franchisees of AmSpirit Business Connections. Our franchisees work with entrepreneurs, sales representatives, and professionals in their area to help them become more successful through networking and the exchange of quality business referrals in a structured weekly morning meeting. This is a unique franchise opportunity, you see, because these meetings are in the morning. A successful business type or professional can add this franchise opportunity onto what they're already doing. Again, all of our franchisees do something else. For a couple hours in the morning, a few mornings a week, these franchisees work the AmSpirit Business Connections model. The rest of the time, they're attorneys, accountants, realtors, coaches, and consultants of various kinds. The wonderful thing is that not only do our franchisees realize a financial gain from operating the AmSpirit Business Connections model, but the business networks that they build and develop become a great source of referrals for their primary business as well. Perhaps you know someone, perhaps you are that someone. Whatever the case, to learn more about the AmSpirit Business Connections franchise opportunity, please contact me using the email in the show notes or the one we provide at the end of this program.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.